Hey everybody, welcome to number 4 of Unpreachable, which is a podcast that we do here on topics they're not unpreachable, but some things require a greater conversation than a 30-minute sermon on a Sunday. So that's what we're doing today. Our topic today is special needs, healings, and miracles. The guest that we have with us today is my very best friend and my wife. Babe, tell them your name.
My name is Anna Cunningham.
Woo! She's here. And before we dive in, let me encourage you to like, subscribe, share, follow, all the things. It helps a podcast like this. And I think today's message is going to be incredibly important. And I want to say this right out of the gate. Like, we're not the exhaustive source on this, but this is also our life.
Yeah.
Like, we have lived this. This is our heartbeat, and we didn't choose this life. This life chose us, right? I didn't choose the streets chose me. But here we are, and I think, and if you're tuning in and you don't have children with special needs, so I guess I should give that update. Like, one of the things here is we have 4 children, and 2 of them God gifted us they have special needs. One has autism and the other one has Down syndrome. So, wild journey of special needs, praying for healing, asking God for miracles, seeing some and not seeing some, and how do you navigate spirituality in the midst of it?
Yeah.
Here we are. Let's dive in. Let's start at the beginning.
So we've been doing this 11 years.
Yeah.
Almost 11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when Zion was 18 months old, I took her in for her 18-month checkup, and they did a test called the MChat. I'm sure other special needs parents are familiar with that. And
which is the modified checklist for autism in toddlers.
Yes. And Zion failed it.
Miserably.
I think it was, I think this, I don't even remember the scores. I think it's like 10, 0 to 10, and I think she was like 10 on it or something.
So I remember it's 0 to 10. Anything over 3 is autism, and she scored 7 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's so long ago. But I was by myself at that appointment. I remember you were actually out of town, and I went in and we had the check, and she's, our doctor looks at me and says, well, this raises a sign, to me, I think this could be autism. And I'm like, autism? I don't even know. I know nothing about this. I have no idea. So I'm like, it's probably not a big deal. You know my personality. I'm just like, go with the flow. It's cool, whatever. I got to the car and I call you and I tell you that. And I remember just hearing you. It was just like your heart just sunk. Like I could just hear it through the phone. And I'm like, well, is this worse than I think it is? What? It was crazy.
Yeah. So I remember that. And I think that's cool to share both our perspectives, because you were at the appointment and I wasn't. And what I remember from it was by the way, totally unexpected. And I think that's the hard thing if you're a parent and you are walking through special needs. It catches you off guard so bad you don't even know how to process it. Same thing with Ezra. When we'll talk about Ezra too, but that was a wild one. He's our son with Down syndrome. But I remember I was at a conference, I was at the National Institute of Christian Leadership, and we were driving back, and you called me, and we weren't even expecting it. I don't even think you knew our doctor was giving Zion the MChat. She started asking questions and would ask one question: how does she do tracking? Does she follow things when you drop them? Does she make eye contact? Is she giving any words or anything? And you answered them, and afterwards she was like, okay, well, she scored 7 out of 10 on the MChat. I think you should consult a neurologist and look into Zion having autism.
Yeah.
And I remember I wasn't even at the appointment, and I remember every detail because I remember when you were telling me on the phone, and I just remember thinking to myself, there's no way. And I think I'm going to cry, by the way. I'm the crier, believe it or not. I'm the one who gets super wrapped up emotionally.
I will too, I'm sure.
But what I remember is, in that moment, everything that you dream of with an 18-month-old daughter from daddy-daughter dances to pedicures and mommy's day out with daughters, to walking her down the aisle at her wedding, to all of these things, like they fly out the door. And in that moment, everything that you imagined life would be like with your child is completely disrupted.
Yeah.
And yeah, it absolutely rattles you.
Yeah.
And I remember that for me. Like, you're right. Like, you called and you were like, so like this MChat thing and like maybe autism. I don't know. What is that? And I remember it. I was riding in a vehicle with like 4 other pastors, and I hung up that call, and I was trying not to like let them know what was going on in the call. And I just sat there for 3 hours on the way back from Dallas to Houston. And I was literally just thinking in my mind, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
What am I going to do? And how do I do this? Okay, so that was one. Let's talk about the other one real quick. And then there's something I want to talk about because I see this often with families with children with special needs. So in between there, we have Zion, and then we have 2 boys, Canaan and Zadok, who are both neurotypical, which there's a miracle involved in the middle of that. We'll talk about that later when we talk about miracles. But we have Canaan, we have Zadok, and then talk to me about the phone call that you got that just kind of matter of fact, kind of like, hey, sorry, just need to let you know.
With Ezra?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we found out we were pregnant with Ezra really fast.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
In between Zadok and Ezra, we had some is it called rainbow babies?
Rainbow baby.
Yeah, we had 2.
We did.
And I think that's an important part of the story.
Yeah.
Because I'll share my emotional side of it.
Yeah.
Like, we were having one more, and we've never had a miscarriage before, rainbow babies or miscarriages.
Yeah.
We've never had that before. And in between 3 and 4, in between Zadok and Ezra, we had one. And we were like super like, this is our last baby. This is going to be a gift. We can't wait. What is God going to give us? And we lose that baby, and it was devastating.
Yeah.
And then it was the second one, right? That was Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah.
Like, the second one was on the Saturday before Sunday morning, Mother's Day weekend. And like, you want to talk about the chaos of ministry for a second? Like, you're a pastor's wife. Mother's Day is huge in the church. And the night before, I mean, I won't go into details, but you know, you're losing a baby, and it's a physical and very visible thing.
Yeah.
And that next morning, you have to suck it up and walk into church and smile and celebrate moms and take pictures and do everything else. Like, looking back, anything in your heart that the Lord did on that weekend? I mean, I remember it just like, how on earth are we going to do this?
It was honestly kind of a blur because they were very early on, the miscarriages, but once you have children and you kind of know like what to expect, like, you get excited. Anyone gets excited when they get when they're pregnant. But just knowing, okay, this is going to be a life. Like, who's this baby going to be? All these things running through your head. It was, I think, May and June, both months back to back, I lost babies. And I think...
So the first one was Mother's Day weekend. That's what I remember. Yes.
Maybe it was that, yeah.
And then the second one was June.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And they got pregnant in July with Ezra.
So, important part of the story, like, we have one miscarriage on Mother's Day weekend. Still have to suck it up, show up to church. And I mean, you're not on Mother's Day weekend walking around mourning, telling everyone we lost a baby last night, right?
We hadn't told anyone we were pregnant.
Yeah. I mean, you just, there's some times where you just can't do that in context, and it would just kill the Sunday and change. So we walk through that, and then we get pregnant again in June. And again, the celebration was like, okay, we lost that baby, and God has given us number 5, which will be number 4 here on earth, and we're ready, and we lose that baby. And then it's like, what on earth is happening? Like, are we supposed to have a 4th child? Is there something, what's going on? And then we get pregnant in July, and you pass like whatever it is, that 8-week period or 10 week.
I think it was 6 weeks.
6 weeks, yeah.
I was so excited.
Yeah, and we're like, yes,
yeah,
this one's in. Like we're gonna make it with this one.
Yeah.
And then you get a phone call.
Yeah.
I want to share how I felt about it, but I want you to share first. Like, take me to the phone call.
So it's crazy. We found out at 7 weeks that it was a boy. We did one of those like at home gender reveals.
Yeah.
Because I was so excited, you know?
This is my world, by the way. It's like, no, we're not waiting 12 weeks. We'll draw blood, mail it to China, and they'll send us back and let us know the gender, you know.
So we knew it was a boy. We knew he was a boy. But, you know, I still did my 10-week check with my doctor, and she did the blood work. And for some reason this time I just decided that I was going to have I forget what they call it, the blood work done where they can check everything with the baby. Normally I don't do that, but this time I was like, oh, I'm going to do it, you know?
Yep.
The Lord. But she calls me, and I was actually at the autism gym, the kids' autism gym with Zion and Zadok.
Yeah.
And they were both swinging on swings, going down the slides, having a great time. And I was expecting her call, but my phone rang, and I saw that it said, you know, my midwife's name. And she just said, hey, Anna, we got your blood work back in. And I can't remember. I think before she told me it was a boy, I already knew, but she said there's high markers for trisomy 21. That's all she said. Very matter of fact. And I was like,
yeah.
Okay, what does that mean? And she said, that's Down syndrome. And I said, okay. And immediately my mind went to, and this is something I've learned over the years, just like the positive side of me, that I can do anything, you know, which I think is good. But at the same time, I've learned a lot through that. I said, oh, it's okay. I got this. This is what I'm saying out loud to her. It's okay. I got this. I live this life. I know this world. It's fine. You know, I'm good. And she said, okay, well, do you want to know what it is? And I said, yeah, I think it's a boy. And she said, yep, you're right. It's a boy. And I said, okay, awesome. Well, is there anything I need to do? Like, you know, nope, we'll just see you at your next appointment. We can go over everything. We're going to have to get you into a specialist, all the things like that. And I'm like, okay, you know, hang up the phone. I'm watching my other two kids play there. Immediately, just like in the middle of this gym, thank the Lord, like there wasn't a lot of people in there, just like break down and start crying. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, God, what is happening? All these emotions are flooding over me. And I'm just like, what does this mean? What am I going to do? Who do I call? What do I don't know. I didn't even remember what she said. If she said it was trisomy 21, 18. You
had to call her back, right?
I called her back because I'm getting on Google. Like, what is, you know?
Horrible idea, by the way.
Right?
Do not Google anything medically. Like, the end result is they're going to die.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Everything. My kid has a sneeze.
For sure.
It's probably swine flu. They're going to die. Right? Like, it always goes back to that. And I mean, we've done that. And you talk about Googling special needs and stuff like that and symptoms. Like, you will drive yourself insane.
Yeah, you absolutely will.
So, sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
You Google trisomy 21.
And then I think a different one came up and it said, you know, the lifespan and all these things. And it's just all within 5 minutes. I'm like, what am I doing?
You Google trisomy 21 and it's like expected life expectancy is 60% and longevity is 30 years. And it's like the worst news you can get.
It's not right.
Yeah.
So then I call you. That's when I called you.
I remember.
And I said, I'm not even sure. I don't even know what she said. I don't even know if it's Down syndrome. I don't know if it's trisomy. You know, like I'm like, I don't even know. So I call her back. I'm like, can you? It's her nurse. Can I talk to my midwife? No, but I can answer a question. I'm like, okay. And then she's like, okay, it's trisomy 21. And I'm like, okay. So that's like a little bit of relief, but still not. You know. Yeah. And I think from there, you know, I called you. I called my best friend.
What did I say on the phone?
I don't remember. I
don't either.
I went into a side room and I just remember just tears just flowing. It was just like hot, sweaty. Like I didn't even know. I kind of blacked out, honestly.
I remember the emotions.
I remember you crying.
Yeah.
You cried on the phone too. And I think I said something along the lines of like, why is this happening again?
Yeah.
Like my first question was, why?
So we've got some friends who are heroes, Chuck and Lynn, right? Who have 2 boys with autism. And I remember Lynn, we were at dinner at their house, and I remember her telling us a story of when they had their second boy with autism. And she said, they already had one, and they've got one neurotypical son too, Colin, who's just a hero. But I think it was Reagan, when they had Reagan, he's the younger one, that Reagan looked up at the ceiling and was stimming on a ceiling fan as a little kid. And she said, oh my gosh, we have another one.
Yeah.
And like, you talk about like almost like prophetic, right? The moment you called me, I remember just in my heart thinking, oh my gosh, we have another one.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and we had a different approach to this one. So let's move into healing and miracles and praying for miracles. Because I think the hardest thing I had to walk through and really had to walk with the Lord with was praying for miracles and desperately crying out for the miraculous while seeing nothing in the natural, and balancing that tension of things not getting better, actually things getting worse. And you go to your prayer life and you're like, Lord, heal, miraculously touch my child by the power of the Holy Spirit, remove autism, give her brain clarity, help her to speak words, remove all inflammation, heal the self-injury. Like, you can hear me. I've prayed this for 8 years, every day. I've prayed it. And like, I'm praying for it. And then the moment I'm finished, I go and experience the exact opposite. Temper tantrums, behaviors, self-injurious behavior, no language, blank stares. And you're balancing this tension of, God, I'm asking you to do something and I'm not seeing anything. What do I do? So like, let's dive into healing and miracles. Let's start with Zion, which is pretty easy. You and I were pretty united in just praying for a miracle and praying for God to heal our daughter. And I still do every single day.
Yeah.
I pray for God to heal our daughter, but we've been pretty united in that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that even from the beginning, I mean, that was kind of where our hope lied. We were just like, we are going to pray this every single day and God is going to move here. Like, we're going to see it, Yeah. And it's just so funny to look back over the past 8 years and it's like, the Lord has done a great work in Zion.
Yeah.
To the world, does she look healed? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't really care, because what the Lord has done in us through our daughter, it's incredible. He has changed us through her.
Yeah.
We've asked for healing over and over and over, and really, like, the healing has come to us, to you and I, as individuals and as a couple.
Yeah, I would say, again, going back to Chuck and Lynn, I'll never forget this moment. And so then, like, but by the way, let's go through all the healing of our children and what we've been asking the Lord for. And then I think it will give full scope perspective of like where we're at.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know this story. We haven't talked very publicly about this. But and maybe let's pause right there, because something that I see that's super common with parents with children with special needs is denial. They don't say it. They don't talk about it. They won't utter the words. They don't, and I get it to an extent. You don't want to speak death over your children. You don't want them to be labeled. You don't want them, but like, there's a difference in not wanting your child to be labeled and being in denial yourself. I will openly admit I went through a long season of denial with Zion. It was not faith. It was not speaking life. It was denial on my own part, right? Like, we're not saying autism. We're not telling anybody about autism. We're not going to speak this death over our child. We're going to contend in faith and believe. We did the opposite with Ezra. With Ezra, we actually said beforehand that here's what we're dealing with. Would you join us in prayer? We're praying for a miracle. We're going to receive whatever God gives us. What do you think was the difference or the impact between the way we handled Zion and the way we handled Ezra?
I think with Zion, not telling people in the beginning, actually for years, and just kind of trying to keep it close to the chest, just kind of to protect her, but also to protect us. There was a lot of unknowns. I think it didn't give people that love us an opportunity to join us.
That's really good.
Like, it didn't give people an opportunity to pray for us or believe with us or sit with us,
Yeah. We suffered alone for a long time.
Yeah, we did. And I think, with Ezra, it started out that way.
Yeah.
The first few months was so hard. It was.
I remember, can I share some of your dirty laundry? I remember when you didn't want to go to church anymore.
Yeah.
Because you didn't want people to ask you about the pregnancy.
Yeah. I didn't want to feel like I was lying.
Right.
But I didn't want to feel like I didn't want to answer questions. I was not ready to answer questions.
And that's the difference, I think, between Zion and Ezra is Zion we didn't know till after. So you're excited, you have the baby, celebrate. You can't even tell until 18 months. They won't even give you a diagnosis until after 18 months, right?
Sure, yeah.
So we're celebrating, it's great, and then we get it and it's heartbreaking. With Ezra, we knew beforehand.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to balance being joyful for our last child and celebrating our last child with a diagnosis of Down syndrome that is just
It's scary.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's extremely scary. And you got to a point, I remember where you were like, Luke, I just don't want to go to church anymore.
Yeah.
Because I know someone's going to ask me, how are you feeling? How's the pregnancy? How's everything going? And I'm going to have to say good. And I feel like I'm lying.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the hardest. I think that was the hardest part for me. And then I remember some friends planned the baby shower for me.
That's
right.
I
remember even up until that day saying, what am I doing? Should we cancel it? Can I just pretend like I'm sick almost?
Yeah.
And I remember the Lord.
I can't taste or smell. Sorry.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I remember the Lord, he spoke so clearly to my heart and was like, no, Anna, you deserve to be celebrated. This baby deserves to be celebrated. These people love you.
Yeah, it's good.
Tell them.
Yep.
And I went to that baby shower and had a wonderful time. And the entire time I was there, I thought, man, these women love me. I need to share this with them. And I remember I came home to you after that shower, and I said, all right, Luke, we've got to figure out a way to tell people before he's born.
Yep.
Yep.
And we did.
And we decided, that social media is.
We literally did one collaborative post.
We did.
Wrote it, posted it at 9 p.m. at night and shut our phones off so we wouldn't see anything.
Yeah.
And woke up in the morning to hundreds of likes and comments and love and support. And look, I also want to acknowledge, because I know personally, and I know, just out there is a payoff to not saying anything, because people do say stupid things, right? People ask silly questions.
Yeah.
People make comments, or I think the things that drove us nuts are, one, people trying to relate to you, right? Oh yeah, I know what autism's like. I've got a son who's hyper, right? And you're like, well, or tell you a story. Oh yeah, I know all about Down syndrome. I used to, go to school with a kid who had Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think you avoid those things by not saying anything.
Yeah.
But the cost is suffering alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with those comments too, you learn over time, people mean well.
100%.
Most people mean well.
100%.
And you can take bits and pieces of what people say to you, and you can say, okay, this person is sharing this with me because they love me.
Yeah.
And they want to relate to me, even if they don't get it. And this is to other special needs parents out there. Even if they don't get it, let people love you.
Way to redeem my Enneagram 8 whole personality, because I'm why are you saying stupid things? But you're right. I think the other side of it is they ignore it and don't try to enter into our world.
Yeah.
And I think that is the beauty of people. In fact, I would give the encouragement. Let me just retract everything I said and say, even if you don't know what to say, making an effort to enter into somebody's world who has children with special needs is better than just staying on the outside, not saying anything, or awkwardly looking in like, I don't know what to do, so I'm not
And
gonna
even
say
better
anything.
than that, enter into their child's world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, talk to our kids. They might
And
not
I've had
talk
a lot
back
of
to you.
growth. So like
Yeah.
I'm the protector of this. And there was this side of me that was like, protect my daughter, right? At all costs.
You're
And
still like that?
I am, but I'm nicer. I mean, at least I hope I am. But like there was a side of me before where like if someone looked at Zion sideways, I was ready to fight. I was like, you do not look at my daughter like that. And now I think learning to celebrate the beauty of who she is and believing the best about people and letting them enter into that as well, even if they don't know how, but giving them that opportunity to experience and be exposed to, I think is far better than just avoiding it, right? Like I even think I've got a friend who he will openly tell me, dude, I can't like serve at night to shine. I know you, I love you. I just don't know how to, that's an uncomfortable subject for me to approach. And so I'll do it for him. I'll say, hey, look at this picture of Ezra. Do you think he looks like he has Down syndrome? Do you think? And he's like, I'm like, be real with me, man. Like this, and he's like, yeah, maybe right. And just give him the opportunity to talk about it, you know, and just to talk about like Down syndrome, autism, what's it like? How do I have conversation? What I'm trying to do is give him a little more comfort with the subject, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that is why a lot of people avoid it, is they're uncomfortable talking about it, and they don't want to hear other people talk about it, and they don't want these labels placed on their kids. I think that that's the payoff, right? The price is you suffer alone.
Yeah.
So we're praying for a miracle for Zion. We're not seeing anything. Zadok's born. Zadok, and I'll just say it. I mean, we've lived this. We've seen autism firsthand. The key giveaway for me was Zadok.
12 months.
12 months. Birthday party.
Yep.
You say it.
At his birthday party, we both looked at him sitting in his high chair.
Yeah.
And it was a spitting image of Zion at one.
Yep. 100%.
And what did I say to you after that party?
He's got autism.
I think he has autism.
Yeah.
I think he has autism.
The exact same thing. Like, for those of you that are familiar with autism, you'll get it. Those of you that aren't, like sensory challenges, no eye contact, all the things.
Blank stares.
He's blank stares. He was sitting in a chair. He had no language.
No language.
He was sitting in a chair. He wouldn't even touch his smash cake. Like, he was so weird sensory with it, didn't want it. Everyone's trying to take pictures of him and he won't even look them in the eyes. He's shaking his head. He won't look at, and it was clear this boy had autism.
Yeah.
And we came together and said, we're gonna do everything in the supernatural, and we're also gonna live in the natural, and we're gonna navigate this, but we're gonna believe God for a miracle. You actually took Zadok. A lot of people don't know this because he talks so well now. This kid is a sharp-tongued kid, right?
Yeah.
But there was a time where he had no language and he was delayed on his speech, and you took him to Zion's old speech therapist.
I did.
And she basically said he looks a lot like Zion, right?
Yeah, she agreed with me that, she said, it is still early on, but I am, I see the same stuff that I did with Zion, and let's start speech therapy now,
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, great. So we're in weekly speech therapy. He's not talking. He's not saying anything. I think we did speech for 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden one day,
Miracle.
the kid just starts talking to me
Yeah.
in sentences,
Nonstop.
like out of nowhere. I remember,
Yeah.
I think I called you.
Yeah.
I should have, this is parents, write things down when your children say them. It's important. But I should have written it down. I remember what he said to me, but we were playing, and he's very good with, he likes to build and have little people, and have them say things to each other. And it's kind of like, I think he's seen them on YouTube or something, you know? And I remember just sitting there watching him, full sentences, making these little people talk to each other, just starts talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'd prayed that every night.
Yeah.
Lord, heal him. Lord, touch him. Lord.
I'm convinced that Zadok is neurotypical today only by a miracle from the Lord.
Absolutely. And it was overnight.
I've seen it. And I don't want to be that pastor and that podcast where it's like, we've seen the miracles. I think it's important to note, I've prayed 8 years for my daughter Zion to be healed, and we haven't seen that. But then there was this moment where we just prayed, and it is by a miracle today that kid is who he is. So then we come to Ezra, and you and I had different approaches with Ezra. I was all in, miracle, healing. He's going to be healed. He's the baby of the 8% or whatever. I was like 92%, chance he's got trisomy 21. And I was like, he's the baby of the 8%, right? And I was really praying for a miracle. And you were pretty resolved in, I would love to see a miracle, but I believe God has a different story.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the beauty of prayer in general is prayer is not us creating our own story and asking God for it. Prayer is us entering into the story that we feel like God is writing for us.
Yeah.
And saying, God, I'm ready for it.
Absolutely.
And you did that. So talk about that. Being on different pages with your spouse. I'm praying for miracles. I remember we went to a doctor's appointment, and afterwards we went to the meal, and we were like, you were kind of like, I really think he's going to have Down syndrome. And I was like, I think God's going to do a miracle. And the food got served, and I was like, let me pray. And I just pray. I'm like, dear Jesus, do a miracle in this boy and heal him. And it was almost like, you pray and talk to your kids. Like, I pray that they're a really good kid and say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and be nice to their mommy and daddy. It was like, I'm going to pray a miracle right into my wife in this moment, right?
Yeah.
But we were, and we handled that really, really well. But what do you remember from that season?
I do remember us being on different pages. I don't know.
Not the first time.
Yeah. I think I just knew in my heart. I knew in my spirit, and I think that's just by, the grace of God. I think that he made it really clear to me that this was my story with Ezra early on. And it wasn't easy. Like we talked about earlier with the pregnancy. It wasn't easy to walk through that pregnancy and go to all the doctor appointment every single week. And hear, he doesn't have a nose bone. Oh, he doesn't have, or there's a weird flutter going on in his heart. Oh, his kidneys look full.
His neck, right? Yeah.
Yeah, his neck, just a number of things each week was something new. And I remember
all the soft markers for Down syndrome.
Sure.
All of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was an answer right there. Yeah. But I think even more so for me, it was just, I had so much time alone during that pregnancy. And I think during that time, I just really pressed in and really talked to the Lord. And just in my spirit, I knew, I was like, this baby will have Down syndrome and he's going to be a blessing. He's going to be a miracle. And then he was born and he had it.
Talk about that moment. That's a moment I'll never forget.
Yeah. So I remember, sorry.
I'll do it. I'll sit. You want me to take over?
No, I got it.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay.
I just am picturing that day. The birth was perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, his birth was so good. Makes me want to give birth again, actually. It was so good. But
what?
But I remember when they placed him on my chest, and we were both, you're standing here looking down, and we're both looking at him immediately. Looked into his eyes, and I knew immediately by looking at him that he had Down syndrome.
So that's the moment I'm talking about. Yeah, I remember. Birth is incredible. It's your best one yet.
Yeah.
You're holding him. You look at him. I was standing over your shoulder. You looked in his eyes, and I'm looking right at him. And then you looked up at me, and you said, he does. And I said, he does.
He does.
Yeah.
We knew.
All right, let me share his miracle story really quick. So right after that, Ezra's born, and it's the 1 hour, golden hour, skin to skin, everything's great. And then they do the exam where they take him over to a little tray and whatever it's called, the heating tray, baby pod deal. And they start checking him over, and they found he had an imperforated anus, which is, let me just say it, it's no butthole. Right?
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah. I was in the bathroom and I came out and everyone was ghost white.
That's right. You weren't even out there, and they called me over. And what was crazy is like 3 other nurses came in and they're all looking at him, and they called me over and they were like, hey, we need to show you something. And here's what I was. I saw this with my own eyes. They lifted both his legs up and there's nothing there. And they looked at me and they said, this is extremely serious. In babies with Down syndrome, a lot of things can happen within their body physiologically. And one of them is a whatever it's called.
Digestive tract.
Yeah, the digestive tract hasn't developed. And a sign of that is an imperforated anus. And that is a very, very, very serious thing. Here's how serious it is. So they're like, this within 24 hours has to be resolved, emergency surgery, or you're going to lose your baby. And I called our midwife, Evelyn, the best in the world, right? Outside of the room. And because you were in there at this point and we had told you, he's got to go. We got to go now.
He'd already nursed and everything.
He'd already nursed.
Yeah.
So I went with Evelyn to the hallway and I said, have you ever seen this before? And she said, in over 30 years, I've only seen it once. And I said, what was the result? And she said, we don't want to talk about that. So we go back in. I told Anna, we've got to go. They load him up, put him on an ambulance. I jump on the ambulance with him. He and I are on an ambulance ride. You're postpartum. You can't leave. We're riding downtown together. We pull up to this hospital, a specialized hospital for babies downtown. Surgical team is literally outside waiting. The surgical assistant is there. She's a pro. She's awesome. She's like, bring me the baby. They rush him right in to prep him for surgery, like not wasting any time. And she goes to prep him for surgery. And I will never forget this as long as I live. She opens up his diaper. And when she opens it up, it's full of poop. Literally full. And I'm like, I think I know what they said he doesn't have, but I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not that kind of doctor.
Didn't she say,
right?
What's this Cunningham baby here for?
She looks at the travel nurses and said, imperforated anus, right? And the travel nurses looked at her and were like, yeah, we saw it. That's why we're here. And she holds up and shows them the diaper. And they were like, there's no way. There's no way. I started going, it's a miracle. We've seen a miracle. Like, this was a miracle. And what was really funny is this. So they call in the surgeon.
Yeah.
And he comes in and he's really cynical. He's like, I hear we've got a miracle, right? And I was like, it is a miracle. Check, it's a miracle. He's like, okay. So he lifts up his legs, takes this little device, starts poking on him to check and make sure, and Ezra crapped all over him. It was like my favorite moment. I was like, you get a miracle, baby, right? He poops all over his hand, and the guy even looks at me and he goes, well, maybe so.
Yeah.
And a key part missing there, when I got on the ambulance, you started sending out a text, and I sent out an emergency text. We need a miracle.
Yeah.
We need a miracle.
To probably over 50 people.
We need God to move.
Yeah.
We need a healing right now.
Right now.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about our story. And I hope it's relatable, but here's where we've landed, right? We've prayed for 8 years for Zion to be healed, and we haven't seen it. We prayed several months for Zadok to be healed, and I am convinced he is talking in who he is today because of a miracle of God. Yeah. We prayed for 30 minutes for Ezra to be healed, and we saw an absolute miracle. How do you navigate that when you are praying for healing and seeing nothing, and then you're also praying for healing and seeing miracles, and you're a person of faith and you have children with special needs? Like, what advice would you give in the midst of all of that? And I would just say this. I think this is really important. I do want to clarify this. I said I would. Ephesians 2:8-9 It says, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God. I think we approach healing the same way we approach salvation, right? His body was broken for our healing. His blood was shed for our salvation. I think it's the same way. And I think Ephesians 2:8 makes it clear it's by grace through faith, and it's not of us. In other words, I think God heals by his grace. There are stories in Scripture where he heals because of faith, and there are stories in Scripture where he heals in spite of faith. There are stories where he heals because of belief, and there are stories where he heals in spite of belief, in the midst of doubt. Like, we don't control God's healing, and any theology that says we do is in error, I believe. I think it is by God's grace. We approach it through faith, but we have to remember it is not of ourselves, right? Yeah. Because we've had some challenges. I would just say challenges, right? Of like, for me at least, I've gone through seasons where I'm like, well, God hasn't healed Zion because I'm in sin, or God hasn't healed Zion because I'm not praying enough, or God hasn't healed, right? And I've put a lot of that on my shoulders when at the end of the day, it's the grace of God. But what would you say to parents who are praying for a miracle and are praying for healing and they're not seeing it? How would you encourage them?
I think, there's multiple things. I think that the Lord has purpose in giving you a child with special needs. Like, there's a purpose that you may not see.
That's really good.
Right in the beginning, but over time, and it may not be an aha moment either, but I think like over time, as you see the growth, as you see the change, as you change as a person, I think that's where it's at.
I totally agree. Chuck's story to me.
Yeah.
One that really changed me. I have a friend, I told Chuck and Lynn, right? I've already mentioned them, 2 boys with autism. And I like to do this. I like to stack my prayers. So if I'm praying for Zion who has autism, I'm also praying for someone else who has autism or has a child with autism. I like to just include that. Yeah. And I told Chuck one day, I said, Chuck, I just want you to know, when I pray for my daughter to be healed, I am also praying for your son to be healed, your boys to be healed. And he said to me, this got me. He said, Luke, I appreciate that. I really do. And I pray for them to be healed as well. But let me ask you a question. He said, would you want to go back to the man you were before you had Zion?
Yeah.
Whew, gets me every time. And I'm like, no. Like, never.
No.
Like, the work that God has done in me through the beauty of Zion, the glory of the Lord will shine forth, right? Yeah. The verse she's named after. Like, the work that God's done in me through the beauty of Zion. And I love what you said. It's going to happen over time.
Yeah.
Because we went through years of hell.
Yeah.
Like, super, super challenging, self-injurious behavior,
super hard.
Just dealing with gross stuff. If you're a parent of a child with autism, you get it.
Yeah.
With bathroom and toileting and stuff, and it's just hard.
Yeah.
Painfully
and just
hard.
Never really talking to your child, never having a conversation with your child.
Yeah.
It took years to learn that. Like, okay, like communicating with your child, you think, oh, that should be easy.
All right.
It takes it's a learning curve, you know? I just think that, man. And another thing about what you said about Chuck, I think sometimes we pray for things and we ask for these things and it's not God's will.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe his will isn't the things that we're praying.
Yeah.
And we're not going to experience, if we continue to pray these things and ask for these things and we're so focused on this, we're not experiencing what he truly has for us over here.
You can get so wrapped up in the miracle that you long for that you miss the blessing that's right in front of you.
Yeah.
I love John 9:1-3. We've talked about this before. It's one of my favorite verses when it comes to special needs. It says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? Amazing. Like they're literally walking, you see a blind man and they're like, oh man, why has he got a disability? Who screwed up? Whose sin is it? Jesus answered, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. This happened so the power of God could be seen through him. Yeah. And I think one of the things that you will miss is the power of God if all you're obsessed with is the miracle.
Yeah.
Maybe God wants to do, and I can say that. Like, do I want healing for selfish reasons here on earth? Absolutely. But has God done a deeper work in me through having a child with autism and a child with Down syndrome than had we not? I mean, absolutely. Like the deepest, most transformational work that's happened in me has been by way of those two kids, right?
Yep.
And learning to serve them like Jesus does. What else does someone navigating healing? And then I have one more question and then we're going to land this thing. Anything else from you? When it comes to you're praying for healing, believing God for healing, I think for me, trusting God is more important than getting miracles.
Yeah.
I'm all for the miraculous, and I'm all for seeing God heal, but trusting God is far more important than getting the miracle that we want, right? Okay. What would you say to a parent who gets a diagnosis? You're a mom listening, or you're a dad and you're on here and you just got a call from your wife who's at the pediatrician's office who says they said our daughter has autism, or you get a call from a nurse that says trisomy 21 markers found, that's Down syndrome. What would you say to that parent in that moment?
I think first of all is to share that with the right people.
That's good.
Share it with people that are going to champion you, get behind you, pray for you. Get people praying immediately. Number one, you need people in your corner. And that's a mistake that I think we've made in the past. So yeah, number one, get people in your corner. Number two, join groups. There are a lot of groups, support groups for autism, for Down syndrome. At first I thought, oh, these are corny, but really there are a lot of other, I'm in a mom's group it's online, but with other moms that are going through Down syndrome diagnosis and just the things that they're experiencing with their children. So I think joining a group is really, really important too. Getting around other people that know what you're going through.
And let me just say that because I do kind of pick on social media quite a bit. I think one of the best things that you've done is found that community online.
Yeah.
Of being in a group with other moms who are navigating having a child with autism and having a child with Down syndrome. Like, in fact, I will even say to you, like, we'll come across something, right? We're dealing with sleep right now. Ezra does not sleep. And Anna will see something, she'll Google something, and it'll say horrible things. And I'll say, ask your mommy group what they think. Because here's what I know. You're not the only one.
Yeah.
You feel like you're the only one. But when you have 13 other moms that say, oh, we did this. Here he is at 14 now and he's doing great. Oh, we've seen this.
Oh,
here she
that's
is
so
at 20.
Important. That's
right?
so important too. Like find somebody that's gone before you.
Yeah.
Find someone who has done this, years before you have, because you can pick their brain. You can ask them questions,
Yep.
They can encourage you.
Here's what I would say. What would you say to someone who got a diagnosis? I will say exactly what my friend Scott Silveri said to me when we were navigating Down syndrome. He's got a son who has Down syndrome, and Scott's an awesome dude. I called Scott, and he said this to me, and this is my new response to anyone who comes to me. He said, the one thing I'm not going to do is tell you I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
Got me. Because it's nothing to apologize for.
No.
Like you are about to experience the greatest piece of the kingdom of God, the most pure, loyal, wonderful, beautiful souls on the face of the planet. Now, it's going to be one of the most beautiful things that you get to see, right? What did Jesus say? So that you may see the power of God in them. It's also going to be one of the hardest things that you have to navigate. It's hard. It's incredibly difficult. but the beauty and the blessing of it will change you in ways that you would have never changed if you didn't get to experience it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're on here navigating diagnosis. I'm not telling you I'm sorry. It's going to be hard, but the blessing and the beauty over time is going to outweigh that difficulty 10 to 1.
Yeah.
All right. We've got to land this thing. Let me ask another question, and then I want to know if you have anything to share. Okay. Here it is. How do you navigate the sorrows of special needs? Because there are sorrows. I mentioned them in the beginning. For me, it's walking my daughter down the aisle. Yeah. For me, it has been, and you know this, and you can air my dirty laundry. I have lived with a perpetual fear of death. I am terrified to die. Because for all intents and purposes, like if outside of a miracle of God, I'm going to have 2 children in my home the rest of their lives. Like they're going to live with me. They're going to be kids on Christmas at 30 and 37, right? They're going to be like, what is that? Step Brothers? They're 2 grown men that act like kids. We're going to have that in our home. They're going to wake up and Christmas.
It's going to be fun.
But there also is the reality of I will be their primary caregiver for the rest of their life. And if I don't outlive them, I don't know, right? Like, how do you deal with the sorrows? What would you encourage a mom or dad?
I think over time it's, I remember like silly things in the beginning, and it may not be silly, maybe right where, you're at right now, but like thinking, Zion and I will never go and get a pedicure, or Zion and I will never, get dressed up and go to her high school dance or whatever. Honestly, like who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like silly worldly things to be like upset about when my daughter is the closest thing on earth to Jesus for me, you know? And she is so much fun, and we get to experience so many other things. Like it's not something to be, there are times that you're going to be sad, and that's okay.
100%.
It's 100% okay to be sad.
You're also not going to have a 16-year-old that's boy crazy sneaking out at night
and trying to buy a Stanley Cup.
Right. Yeah, that was one. And so for you guys to catch up on a story,
there was a girl. This age.
Yeah, there was a girl who was about Zion's age, and she was in Five Below. And typical kid stuff. Our one of our sons would probably say this, but she saw a knockoff Stanley Cup in Five Below, and she looked at her mom and said, "There is no way I am getting a knockoff Stanley Cup."
And I'm like, Lord, thank you for Zion.
Right. There are moments where you're like, we will never deal with that with Zion. Right.
Yeah.
Like there are things to celebrate. And I think you bring up a great point. Like if you live out your relationship with your child through your own expectations and they have special needs, or even if they don't, you're going to consistently be disappointed and you're going to put pressures on them they don't deserve.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. It's just constantly living out your own expectation versus saying, okay, we may not travel a ton.
Yeah.
We may not go to a lot of restaurants.
We didn't travel till Zion was 9.
Right.
We
may not go to amusement parks.
Yeah.
We may not do these things, but God's going to give us other things. And God's going to create I think that's the beauty of special needs, is that the closeness of your family is just so beautiful, how it unites you and bonds you. For me, that's it. Like, what would I say to somebody dealing with sorrows? I wrote down 4 things.
Okay.
I said, number 1, you have to have an anthem. Like you have to have an anthem. For us, you had your Ezra playlist, right? And played it constantly. Something that just brings your soul to a place of worship and war.
Yeah. Like I would walk every day of my pregnancy and just play that thing over and over and over.
Yep.
It filled my spirit. It's what I needed in that moment.
And our worship pastor, Bree, who's a super close friend of ours and just incredible songwriter, wrote an anthem for us that at the time I would just sing it, and because I'm in contention for a miracle. You don't run out. The whole premise of the song is you don't run out of miracles.
Yeah.
I'm contending for a miracle, and I'm fighting for a miracle, and I'm singing it and I'm declaring it. You couldn't sing the song without crying until after Ezra was born.
I tried.
But we had to have an anthem. And that became an anthem. In fact, I think it releases soon. If you are a parent navigating these challenges, like, let this become your anthem. We had to have an anthem. I think the second thing you have to have is a daily walk with God. You've got to have a time where you are reforming and recommitting your trust to him on a daily basis, especially if you're navigating the sorrows and challenges of special needs. I think the third thing, and this is where you and I have won, and one of the heartbreaking things about parents with children with special needs is a divorce rate is sky high. I think it's in the 70 percentile. And I'll say this, I get it. Like, it is a super hard, I don't excuse it, but I can understand it, because you are facing constant challenges that the enemy can use to divide you. And I think one of the commitments we made was we would be a team.
Yep.
In fact, we would look at each other in the middle of the night through incredibly difficult things and say, we did it.
Yep.
We're a team.
Yep.
Like, we've stayed a team together, and that is, you just have to have that if you're going to make it work.
And I think in the hard times too, you remind each other of that too, you know?
Yeah.
Like, there was times where it would cause arguments. It would cause fights,
totally.
Tired, sleepless nights, just, you know, you doing something one way, me doing it another way, not agreeing. But we would always come back to, okay, we are a team. God has put us together. This is a challenge, but we're going to do this together, and not giving up on each other throughout the whole thing.
The last thing is seeing it as spiritual formation.
Yes.
Like, God is using these kids to form us spiritually in a way that we otherwise would have no clue of. Zion makes me like Jesus. Ezra takes me to a place of joy in the Lord like I've never experienced before. It's spiritual formation, and God is doing a deep work.
Yeah.
All right. What else do you want to share? Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I wrote down a couple of things just that were really important to me that I'd love to share. And I know we touched on a couple of these already, but I just want to reiterate that it is normal and it's okay to feel sad sometimes. We can't receive comfort from the Lord if we refuse to acknowledge that this is hard and that we need his help. Psalm 130 verse 1 says, out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord, hear my voice. I think a lot of times, we have to just sit in that, and we have to realize, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to, to cry. It's okay to sit in that for a moment and just let the Lord bring the comfort to us, because ultimately he's the only one that can. The other thing I wanted to share was that God has purpose in a life of raising children with special needs.
That's good.
Sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes we don't understand why. But I find my comfort in knowing that our Father sees all. He's always working things together for our good. Romans 8:28 says, we know that all things work together for good to those that love God, to those who are called according to his purpose.
I love you.
I love you.
This is a weird format for us because I feel like I'm interviewing you kind of,
no.
We're like podcast buddies right now. But I want you to know you're the best teammate in the world. And I couldn't imagine doing this life without you. And I'm so glad. And this is a big step for me. You've known my walk in this. Yeah. I'm so glad God has given us the gift of children with special needs.
Me too.
Miracles, no miracles, healings, no healings.
Yep. God's
doing a deeper work, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it can be a sweet offering to him if we let it.
Let me close with this. That was beautiful, by the way. Jan just hit me with a flashcard, a prompter. I got the prompter. This is a Ron Burgundy moment. The song is out. The Miracles song, You Don't Run Out, is out. And I mentioned that in the podcast. You have to have an anthem. And even if you're not navigating special needs, but you're contending with God for a miracle or a healing, this song is so incredible. Like I said, our worship pastor was praying for us. Bree was praying for us. And in the midst of praying for us, started singing, started writing. And this is the product of it. This is the anthem. God doesn't run out. He doesn't run out of miracles. I love it. All right. That's it. We'll see you next month.